What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some highlights from the Steam Autumn Sale, which I suppose if you didn't know, kicked off yesterday from the time of this video and is running through October 6th. And as always, I enjoy covering Steam sales to, of course, kind of shed a light on some great deals where you could save some money, but also I think it's fair that as a reviewer who often recommends people buy things on sale, that I cover those sales. Now, that said, as usual, the spring and autumn sale are not typically as big as the summer and winter sales, but there's still plenty of good deals to go around, and that's obviously what we're here to talk about. But as a little bit of a reminder, or some fresh information if you're watching me for the first time here, what I like to cover in these is the games that have released this year that are going on sale for perhaps the first time, alongside a bunch of games that might be relevant to upcoming releases, and while there's not a whole lot of that specifically, this year's releases have actually seen quite a few deals in this particular sale, but otherwise, outside of that, I also like to cover, of course, my favorite games and just some one-offs, that kind of thing. And to that end, I'm going to be moving pretty quickly because there's a lot of games to get through here, but I have in fact reviewed like 95% of these if you're interested in a more detailed breakdown. And while I am covering a lot of games, I ultimately cannot cover all of them as thousands of games typically participate in these sales, and so if I missed one that you are particularly excited to point out, by all means drop it in the comments below. And last but not least, I am based in the US, so I am talking US currency. And finally, let's go ahead and dive into all of these. So kicking it off with, I think, the only place that's fair, which is in fact the game that I bought for myself, which is actually RoboCop Rogue City. This released at the end of 2023. I've heard a lot of good things about it. It being an over-the-top first-person shooter where you play as, of course, RoboCop, as they bring that franchise to a different medium, of course. You can find this game for a whopping 90% off, bringing its base game down to $5 US and its deluxe edition version to $6 US. Won't be immediately, but I have been wanting to get around to playing that eventually, which is why I picked it up, and for cheap, no less. Next up, let's talk a little bit about Doom. So, Doom the Dark Ages released this year, and I would imagine to sort of coincide with that particular game being on the sales list, they've also discounted the other Doom games. In particular, however, you can pick up Doom Eternal for also 90% off, bringing that down to about $4 US, and Doom the Dark Ages specifically is 33% off, bringing it down to about $47, and it's a pretty fun experience. I had fun playing that one earlier this year, so figured I would mention it. Another game I wanted to call out was actually Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance. A 2024 release technically, but if I'm being honest, the only reason it's on this list is because I keep remembering that I have yet to get around to actually playing it, and to that end it's 55% off, bringing it down to about $26 US, and one of these days I will finish playing that one. Speaking of JRPGs, however, you may be aware that Final Fantasy VII's Rebirth remake portion of the Final Fantasy VII remakes came to PC this year, and as it stands, you can pick up both the first one, Remake Intergrade, alongside Rebirth together in a bundle for about 40% off, bringing them collectively to $60 US if you want to get caught up there. As I have recently played those for myself, actually earlier this year, Square Enix had sent over some review codes for them to coincide with the PC release, and I had a lot of fun going through them, and I imagine some other people might as well, but we're not done with the JRPGs just yet, because speaking of remakes, we also had the Dragon Quest III HD 2D remake that dropped in, I think it was December of last year, but they made this one first because it's actually a prequel to 1 and 2 from what I understand. But if you remember, in my review I actually gave this one a buy on sale, and it is on sale for 35% off, bringing it down to about $40 US, which I think is a pretty good price for it, though if you're wondering why I gave it a buy on sale, long story short, it was a bit expensive at $60 US, and also the content they actually added in the remake, which was some in-game dungeons, were just not good. The rest of it, pretty good time though. Switching gears a bit to one of my favorite Souls-likes out there that actually released this year is none other than the first Berserker Khazan, which is 30% off, bringing it down to $42 US, and I will say, as a guy who plays a fair few Souls-likes, but I admit I'm no Iron Pineapple or anything, I did nonetheless really like the first Berserker Khazan. Probably not least of which because of a lot of the DNA that it shares with a game like Neo, which I also really love, but either way, fantastic game. It was worth it at full price. Now you can get it a little cheaper. But let's say you're not into something so notoriously difficult. Let's say you want something a little more lighthearted, and with that in mind, something like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza might just be for you. Following, of course, the wacky and zany adventures of a pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, and more specifically as a bit of a spin-off to Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. Pirate Yakuza released earlier this year, and it is a lot of just really bizarre fun, as you would probably expect if you've played the series much. It's not terribly long either. Those games are pretty notorious for being a lot. As a spin-off title, this one is a little more tame in that regard, but with the big emphasis on pirates in the modern day, a customizable ship, big crew battles, that kind of thing. It's a lot of just nonsense, and I think for 40% off at $35 US, it's a good time. Keeping it moving, however, next up we're going to talk about Tactics Ogre Reborn. So coincidentally, today, the day this video is going live actually, is also the release of Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicle, a beloved tactics game from a long time ago that if you happen to enjoy, you'll probably want to follow it up with something like Tactics Ogre, which released around the same time, but Reborn is also a remake, and adds a lot of great stuff to an already great game. And at 60% off, bringing it down to about $20 US, that is a lot of value for not a lot of money. Next up, we've got Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon. A bit of a bizarre one that does a lot of fun stuff. Often compared to things like Skyrim, I don't think that comparison is entirely apt, but I get it. Either way though, really great AA adventure that released earlier this year back in May, and it is on sale for 20% off, bringing its base down to $35 US. And in addition to just being on sale for what I believe is the first time, I also wanted to call out the fact that they have since launch put out a patch 1.1 and stuff, fixed a lot of bugs, that kind of thing. And so if you're waiting for this one to get into a better state and be a little cheaper, you may want to jump in and consider it at this point. But I admit, probably nobody would blame you for waiting for the winter sale either. Speaking of fun, small, weird little games though, next we've got The Necromancer's Tale, an indie CRPG that I was very happy with earlier this year. You see, The Necromancer's Tale is pretty much what the title would tell you, a necromancer's tale. In particular, it puts you in the shoes of someone who basically becomes a necromancer over the course of the story, and it just scratches an extremely specific itch. And if you would like to experience that for yourself, it is at 15% off, bringing it down to $22 US. But let's say you don't necessarily want something obscure. Let's say you want to play a modern version of something pretty well known but previously hard to get into. Well, then you may just want to consider System Shock 2's 25th anniversary remaster that released just a few months ago, getting its first sale, bringing it down to $24 US. You could jump into this one and see what all the fuss is about. Having played this one for myself, I can honestly say that despite not being a full-on remake or anything compared to the first one, it is still a shockingly good, pun intended, experience all these years later. And while the System Shock 2 remaster itself is very good, you may obviously want to play the first one as well, which is a full-blown remake, by the way, and that one is actually 65% off, bringing it down to $14 US. And while those games are great, next up I want to talk a little bit about my personal frontrunner for Game of the Year 2025, which is none other than Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. This game's on a pretty good sale at the moment, bringing it down to $42 US with a 30% sale. However, that is for the base game. If you want to grab the version that comes with all of the DLC, that is actually $52 US. It's going to get 3 major planned DLCs. 2 of them have already released, and you could play those now, and then the other one is upcoming, so do be aware of that if you try to buy that one. Either way, though, tremendous RPG, and I will obviously wait and see if anything else tops it this year for me. Speaking of upcoming games, though, you may want to check out The Outer Worlds ahead of the release of The Outer Worlds 2 later on in October, and with that in mind, The Outer Worlds itself has a base game sale of, I believe it's like 75% off for $7. For the version that comes with the DLC, or the DLCs themselves and everything, in total you're looking at about $18, which is still fairly cheap, again, if you kind of want to see what this one was about before the sequel launches. However, the sequel will be more of a standalone thing. There's obviously like in-universe setting and stuff connections, but it's not a direct sequel. You don't need to play it. so certainly don't feel obligated. Having briefly mentioned my own Game of the Year, though, only fair that I certainly mention other people's Game of the Year via Clair Obscur Expedition 33, a fantastic title that released in 2025 that really resonated strongly with a lot of people, myself included. I loved the story of this game. However, it is only on a pretty light sale. It's got a 10% off, bringing it down to $45 US, so I imagine they might be just waiting on the winter sale on that one, but still wanted to mention it, of course. Next up, we've got The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion's remastered version that launched earlier this year, and I was ecstatic to play through it. I love Oblivion, hands down one of my favorite games of all time, and for many reasons that I don't want to get into in this video, I loved getting to run through this again. Now, people have mentioned plenty of issues about performance and how this thing is running, which is a fair enough concern, as it seems to be a pretty mixed bag for a lot of people in that regard. Some people have really no problems at all, and other people have nothing but problems, which is, I would say, pretty standard for Oblivion in some ways. But either which way you look at it, that game is 20% off, bringing it down to $40 US, so if you're looking for a bit of a cheaper price there, certainly not a bad way to go. And then last up, before we get to my personal favorites, I wanted to call out Avowed, a bit of a change in direction for the Pillars of Eternity universe. The world of Eora, the world itself, I am especially attached to, and while the genre switch certainly comes with its own challenges and things that got shuffled around, that kind of thing, I do think the world is still fantastic and worth experiencing, and to that end, if you're interested, it's 33% off, bringing it down to about $47 US. And now we're going to get to my personal favorites. So these are just some of my own favorite CRPGs and stuff that were taking part in the sale that I wanted to mention. These are the games you've likely heard me talk about at length many times if you've watched the channel much, so it only feels natural to make sure that they get some screen time here. Speaking of Avowed just a moment ago, I think it makes logical sense to start off with Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire then. That game is 75% off with all of its DLC and everything being a whopping $15 US. And I know what my regular viewers are thinking, is he gonna mention the thing? I am going to mention the thing. So, Deadfire is a tremendous game. I really enjoy it so much, in fact, that just this year, after a full 6 years of being a running thing, I personally became the 15th person to officially beat a challenge called the Ultimate that the developer, Obsidian Entertainment, themselves has to verify. That challenge is by far, I would say, my greatest gaming accomplishment, and to that end, if you want to see what kind of game might drive a man to complete something called the Ultimate, by all means, pick up Deadfire and find out for yourself. But if any of that was confusing, I also made a bunch of videos about what that is to begin with, if you want to know. Either way, though, great game, play it. Next up, Octopath Traveller 0 is launching in December of this year, which is going to be like a prequel to the Octopath Traveller series. And to that end, you can actually pick up Octopath Traveller 1 and 2 during this sale for 60% off, bringing them together to a collective $22 US. I loved Octopath Traveller 2. Fantastic game, and I honestly just wanted a reason to talk about it in this video, and so you should definitely check those out, and I will of course be reviewing 0 in December. Chances are you're probably not aware, but much of what got my channel's foot in the door of the YouTube algorithm was actually a game called Divinity Original Sin 2, which I covered to death back then, and it is to this day one of my favorite CRPGs. And if you'd like to find out why, that game is 70% off, bringing it down to $18 US, which is a tremendous value considering I have played that game an extreme amount. And yet these next three I have played just as much, starting with Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. My personal favorite game of all time to this day is on a tremendous sale. That game is 75% off, which includes all of its DLC for $18 US. And if you have seen the amount of content I have put into that game, alongside actually playing it for myself, I mean, you could get potentially thousands of hours out of that if you really wanted to, and for $18, I mean, that's nothing. And given that they are finally finished putting out DLC and everything, and that is a fantastic price, I don't know what you're waiting for at this point. Speaking of Owlcat Games, their developer though, we then have Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. Now this game is just straight away still getting DLC. There are 2 more planned for next year, but right now the base game and the currently available DLC via Season Pass 1 that you could buy with the base game are together about $40 US, which is on its own a few hundred hours of content if you really wanted it to be. So I thought it was of note, but at this point, if you're waiting for it to be complete via DLC, you've still got a ways to go. Speaking of complete games, though, we then got Baldur's Gate 3 on a 25% sale, bringing it down to $45 US. Thought that was worth mentioning now that they are pretty much done patching it and putting out proper content updates for it. And so, while chances are, if you watch a channel like mine, you have bought and played this already, and honestly, chances are you've probably bought and played it already at all if you're watching secondary games media, seeing how extremely popular this game was. But on the off chance you haven't, it's on sale. It's finished from a content perspective. Pretty good time to buy it. And that is naturally where we're going to leave off for this particular video. So certainly hope you enjoyed hearing about all those. I'd love to know if you wind up actually buying anything in the sale via the comment section below. And by all means, again, if you find a particularly great deal you want to mention, drop it down there at the same time. But that is going to do it for today. Naturally, that means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.